What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Welcome back to the Respawn, where I answer your questions. Today we're talking about new Nintendo-themed skins, reverting past nerfs, and more. Today's video is sponsored by Audible. You can get a free audiobook to keep forever and support the channel by using the link down below. If you haven't tried audiobooks yet, what are you waiting for? They're awesome. I listen to them every single day. That's not an exaggeration. If I'm working on images for my videos, I got an audiobook going, or if I'm cleaning the house, or if I'm going to the store, or maybe just relaxing at the end of the day, I always have audiobooks going. They're awesome. And with Audible, there's a great no-hassle return policy. You can exchange any book at any time for any reason. If you don't like it, you can swap it out. And now you can get a free audiobook using the link down below. So don't wait anymore, go and try it out. Let's get started. First question, since Overwatch is now going to be on the Switch, do you think they'll add anything Nintendo themed to Overwatch? So we're talking character skins that look like Mario, Link, Bowser, all that sort of stuff. We did get a loot box update about a year ago that had a whole bunch of Blizzard characters, but Blizzard owns all that, so they can do whatever they want with it. As far as Nintendo stuff, I don't think so. Nintendo is not going to want to have their characters on an Xbox or a PlayStation, and then Microsoft and Sony are probably not going to want to have Nintendo stuff on theirs either. So you end up with a problem where you can only put it on one console. That's probably not going to be really good. And then the other consoles are going to want something like the people that play on those. So you might end up having to have like a console exclusive skin for each different thing. Now they did do something like this for other games in the past. The one that comes to mind is Soul Calibur 2 way back in the day. For the GameCube, you had Link. For the Xbox, you had Spawn from the comics, and for PlayStation, you had Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. So that kind of worked with that, but I don't think Blizzard's going to be willing to do that, because then for the people that play on computer, what are they going to do? Are they going to get all three? I don't think that's going to happen, so they'd have to make another fourth one. So you have to have 4 skins just to kind of balance everything out, and it just doesn't seem like it would really be worth their while, pretty much, right? So I don't think so. Next up, since the meta is double barrier, why does no one play Bastion? For the same reason why no one played Bastion in Bunker Comp. He is a terrible character. He is objectively bad. He is far too stationary. It takes him too long to relocate and to do damage and to just adapt to what's going on in the match. So even other characters like Orisa, which you would typically view as a kind of stationary character, she still moves around quite a bit and replaces the barrier and all that stuff. And now with the, Moira Lucio that you have, Orisa is moving around way more often than before, but with Bastion, you can't move when you're in sentry mode. It takes you too long to kind of shift out, relocate to another area, go back in, and this whole time when you're moving across, you're not doing nearly as much damage, and then when you finally set up, you're a lot more vulnerable because you're kind of locked into one spot. So yeah, you can use Bastion in these kind of cheesy plays when the enemy isn't expecting it, and you can surprise them and maybe you catch them off guard and you can kind of win that way, but most of the time, Bastion's just garbage. If the enemy is expecting it, then you're gonna get destroyed. So that's just why Bastion doesn't get used. Next up, do you think we'll see another member of Los Muertos, possibly another stealth hero? Well, I don't think we're going to have another stealth hero, or if we do, it's going to be more of a very short kind of duration thing where you just activate it and then you get invisible for like maybe 4 or 5 seconds and you use it as some kind of an escape or something like that. I don't think you're going to have any more of this kind of... I guess it is permanent invisibility, right? So you can just run around and do whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. As far as Los Muertos, sure. I think there definitely could be a pretty cool character with that. I made a character from Los Muertos for one of my hero concepts, and his name is Vidal. I even made a full comic to go along with it. You can check out that stuff. I'll put links for that on screen and down below. Watch the comic. It's awesome. And then check out the character as well. Next up, do you think reverting the armor nerfs would be good? Yes. So those armor nerfs that they made not too long ago were specifically done in order to weaken Goats Comp, but we don't have Goats Comp anymore. Now, just recently, some of the Overwatch devs talked about how they're not reverting those nerfs that they made for Goats, And it makes no sense to me. Like, the problem doesn't exist anymore, and you're still nerfing the characters. Like, why? Like, you should just revert it. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it would make characters like Reinhardt and Winston a little bit stronger, because then you have other stuff like, for example, Sigma and Zarya, who don't have any armor, and, you know, Sigma is quite good right now, and he would get kind of weakened by this change because he doesn't have armor, so he doesn't have fully the defensive abilities that some of the other characters now. Of course, Orisa does have armor, so I don't know, you know, you could have some issue with that there, but definitely the armor and probably a bunch of those other changes that they made specifically for GOATs, yeah, get rid of it. It doesn't make any sense to keep it anymore. Next up, why isn't Junkrat getting much play? Well, it's kind of difficult for him to deal damage. He's very good at breaking barriers when there's just one of them, but with double barriers, what ends up happening is if you're trying to break the barriers, then that's all Junkrat is doing. You're just constantly attacking into the barriers to destroy them, and maybe if you have enough support, you'll be able to get through both of them, right? But most of his time is just empty damage on barriers, right? He's not actually building his ultimate because you don't gain ult charge from hitting the barriers, and you're not taking out the enemies, again, because you're just hitting barriers. Next up, has Blizzard cornered themselves into a spot where they can't balance the game? Alright, this one's gonna get me in trouble. The game has never been balanced. The game has been out for over 3 years. It has never, not once, been anything even remotely close to balance. I don't care what Jeff Kaplan says. The game has never been balanced, right? At any point in the entire history of Overwatch, there have been a few characters that are must-picks. There are a whole bunch of characters that are just completely unviable. You have a couple characters that are so garbage that almost nobody uses them. Bastion. And then you also have really the only way to ever counter any of the metas that have ever existed, whether it was GOATs or Dive or Double Barrier or Beyblade, whatever, right? It doesn't matter what the meta is. The only way to counter the meta comp is by running a mirror match of the meta comp, right? There isn't enough of the rock, paper, scissors stuff to actually go around. Like, yes, you do have a little bit of that where this comp A does kind of counter comp B a little bit, but in almost the entire history of Overwatch, the best way to counter whatever is meta is to simply run it yourself, rather than trying to do that rock, paper, scissors thing. So the game has never been balanced. So you can't, you know, they can't put themselves into a corner where they can't balance the game if it's never been balanced to begin with. So there you go. I mean, I could talk about that for an hour, but let's move on. Next up, why is Moira suddenly meta if just 1 month ago she was considered horrible because of her lack of utility? So in the lower bracket, Moira has been a strong pick for quite a while because she has very powerful healing, good kind of escape and sustainability mechanisms, and, you know, it's easier than characters like Ana, right? So if you have bad aim, then you don't want to play Ana. And if you're in bronze, chances are your aim is not going to be all that amazing, so it's a lot more effective to heal your teammates with Moira because you just kind of look in their general direction and press the button and they get healed, right? So it's a little bit easier that way. Now, as far as the upper bracket and the pro scene, the reason why Moira is being used is because of the double barrier. Now, when the game shifted over into 2-2-2, you had a tiny bit of Moira being used with Bunker, and I'm talking the Orisa Roadhog version of the Bunker, or the Orisa Diva version of Bunker. But now that we're into the double barrier with Orisa and Sigma, it's a bit of a gameplay change, because no longer are you just kind of sitting in your spot as the Bunker. Instead, with the new version with the double barrier, you have a Lucio who's going to speed your team around. So you have a surprising amount of mobility, even in an Orisa comp, because what you're trying to do with Orisa and Sigma quite often is leapfrogging your barriers forward, because you want to have the benefit of your barrier while removing the benefit of the enemy Orisa barrier. So what ends up happening in a lot of situations, you'll see the Orisa throw their barrier down, and then you have your Orisa will throw the barrier past theirs, and then your whole team moves through the enemy barrier onto the other side. So now you're getting the benefit of your Orisa barrier and your Sigma barrier, but their Orisa barrier is now worthless because it's behind you. So you have this kind of leapfrogging thing that goes on with the barriers, and when you have a character like Ana or a Baptiste in a lot of situations, they can't heal you because they can't go through that barrier. But what can heal you is Moira, because she can stay right up with the Orisa and the Sigma, and no matter where they move, no matter how they're leapfrogging those barriers around the map, she can stay right with them and constantly provide a massive amount of healing. And then you have the Lucio, who's also giving them the speed boost and moving them around quite quickly. So that is why you have a lot more Moira now, because she's able to stay with the tanks and provide that healing, and it is a lot harder in order for the enemy team to actually cut off that healing source with their barriers. So there you go. Next up, should there be more piercing projectiles in the game? So if you don't know, piercing projectiles like Reinhardt's Fire Strike goes right through barriers and continues to do the damage. I think they could definitely add more to the game, but you don't want to go too far with it because then you would just render barriers worthless. And as far as making a character that has a primary attack that goes through barriers, I don't think you would want to have that on all the time. Like if every single one of their attacks went through the barriers, that would probably be way too strong. Now, there are some characters like Winston and Reinhardt that can attack through barriers, but that's very, very close range, right? You don't want to have someone like a Soldier or a Hanzo who can sit quite a good distance away and have all of his attacks go through a barrier. That wouldn't work. That would be bad. Now, you could have something that is an ability where they activate it and for the next 4 or 5 seconds, all of their attacks ignore barriers. Like, you could do that, but you don't want to have it as a constant thing. So, yeah, more piercing projectile type stuff could work, but you got to be careful with it. Next up, if I pre-order Overwatch for the Switch and link my Xbox account to it, will I get the Widowmaker skin for my Xbox account? The answer is no. There is no item sharing across the platforms. And I think there should be. I've talked about this just recently, but Blizzard did answer, I think it was this question specifically from someone else, and they said no, and I believe they said something along the lines of, we want people to have a fresh start on the Switch and have it be a kind of unique, fresh experience, or something to that effect. Essentially, no, we're not going to do it. Please buy loot boxes. Pretty much, right? I don't know. Next question. What's the biggest mistake Silver players make in their games? I think probably the biggest mistake that players make, not just in Silver, in lower bracket, but in general, would be they stay in the open way too much. They often rely on barriers to be like the only source of protection. You can't do that. You've got to use the map, the corners, the walls, the high ground, that sort of stuff. They shouldn't have a full, clear line of sight to you all the time. That's just bad. I can't tell you how many people, even in Diamond Master and occasionally in GM, you see these players who, they're just standing in the open. Like, what are you doing? Like, get over there. Like, get behind a wall or something. Like, I don't know why you're standing in the open. So I think that would be, just be more aware of it and try to use cover a lot more often. Next up, what do you think of the idea of Bastion being a tank? I don't think it's a good idea. I've had a couple of people bring this one up to me. I don't think it's a good idea. Bastion is a DPS. Pretty much everything about the character says DPS. Yes, I know his ultimate is a tank. Ha 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 ha. But the thing is, the character is designed to do damage. And if you were to change him into the tank role, then you would have to massively, massively nerf his sentry mode damage. And it just doesn't really feel right. If you're in sentry mode and you're basically throwing nerf balls at people, then, I don't know, it doesn't feel like that's how the character should work. And again, another problem with a lot of these Bastion reworks that I see is they're still focused on having a permanent sentry mode, right? Where you switch into sentry mode, and some of them, you know, sometimes they say maybe you get a barrier back, maybe you get extra kind of damage reduction, resistance, that sort of stuff, or you get this or that, some other special ability that protects against. It doesn't matter. The problem with Bastion, why he is so bad, is because he is such a stationary character. You can't have a character that just sits in one spot for so long. It just doesn't work. If you didn't see it, I made a Bastion rework video a little while ago, and I fully went through every single problem. I broke it down entirely. What is wrong with the character, how to fix it, and step by step going through it, and also a couple of suggestions on how the character should be reworked. So I'm going to put a link to that on screen and down below if you want to check that out. In addition to the Los Muertos Vidal character that I also mentioned earlier, that stuff will be down below as well. But that's going to be all the questions for this week. Thank you to everyone who's submitted one. Remember, I post the question card every Saturday on the community tab of my YouTube channel, and you can find a full list of every question ever asked on my Discord server. Link for that down below. Also, don't forget, you can get your free audiobook by using the link below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.